All right, Ralph, I usually start with a scripted question, which I'm still going to ask it to some degree, but you have plenty of credibility, so you don't have to give the whole backstory. So I usually ask people, how did they accidentally fall into franchising? Because everyone accidentally falls in. But line it up before the melt. Give your story before the melt, and then we'll dive into the melt.
Okay. So I came to franchising in a pretty unconventional way. I went to Annapolis, and I was on board a ship, and then I was stationed in the Pentagon. And while I was in the Pentagon, I was getting ready to go back to sea. And I saw an ad in the newspaper, and the Domino's Pizza store managers were making more than the admiral I was working for. And I thought, I think I could be an average Domino's Pizza store manager. And so I went from being an admiral's aide to a 3-star admiral in the Pentagon to being a manager in training at Domino's, making $4.75 an hour. I had a 1-year-old. I'm very proud of the fact that it did only take me 6 months to work my way up to $5.25 an hour, though. And but I worked my way up through the Domino's system, and then I spent several great years at Yum, eventually becoming the COO and president of Popeyes and the CEO of Payway.
I hear something on that opening story that I think it's going to be important as we go through this discussion and journey today. But the military background traditionally teaches you probably more about how to operate anything than any other type of training. And so obviously you're seeing an ad in a newspaper for Domino's, and maybe you don't have the traditional restaurant background at that point, but did all of that hard work in the military side of life then set you up for the success? Like, did it give you a playbook that you were able to access when you got into Domino's?
Sure. I think running a restaurant is more similar to being in the military than you might guess. I think the first thing is being in the military, what it teaches you is how to work with people who come from all walks of life. On board a ship, you're going to have people that are extraordinarily smart and people who maybe not so much. You're going to have folks that are extremely hard workers, and other people maybe not so much. You're going to have some people with just a ton of natural talent, and it takes very little leadership to get them where you need to go, and other people not so much. And that's not all that different from being in a restaurant. One of the things I love about the restaurant business is that you get the opportunity to work with an extraordinarily varied cross-section of people. And one of the things that I believe strongly is that great leaders figure out how to adapt their leadership style to what that particular individual may need from them. Those individuals shouldn't have to adapt to you. And you learn that in the military, and it's true in restaurants. I know I used to get asked a lot, it must be way easier in the military where everyone has to do what you tell them to do. And that is an extraordinarily broad misconception. The military is not any different than anywhere in life. The best way to lead people, to align and build a team, is through influence. And it's always better to lead people to self-discovery and influence than it is to try to force people to do things your way.
There's another aspect that I would imagine being in the military and in the situations that you were in that do cross apply into business in general. And obviously we're talking restaurants as a part of the segment, but it's the ability to deal with crisis. And that is something that business owners, the ones that can go through the brick walls and the ones that can't, stall out. Is that another aspect of this?
I definitely think that that's true, is that, one of the things I talk about, 3 principles of running a shift at the Melt, and they are: be in charge, give direction, attack bottlenecks. And that's pretty much true in anything that you do. in times of a crisis, you want a leader who is in charge and giving direction. Where you run into problems is when people go silent when there's a crisis. The kind of crisis that you have in the military is a lot different than the type of crisis you have in a restaurant, but it's still the same, is that you need leaders that are going to be in charge and give direction. And that's how you get out of a tough situation in a restaurant. And that's how you get out of a tough situation in the military as well.
You're a humble guy, but I'm gonna say this statement because I think there's some magic of what you're talking about. And this probably happened at Domino's, it probably happened at Popeyes. Like along your career, it continues to happen. But your three principles and your philosophy on leadership ends up giving foundational elements to the bottom all the way to the top that can carry on far beyond whatever business, Domino's, Popeyes, Payway. Is that part of the magic here, is when you don't put so much pressure on the business and you more so put pressure on operational leadership and people guidance, that's part of where the magic of good business comes from?
Yeah, people misunderstand all the time what makes a restaurant successful. And I think it's very important as leaders to take the complicated or the difficult and make it simple. I always say simple is better than perfect. And I have two main principles that I believe are important when it comes to running great restaurants. That if you're going to be a great restaurant company, you need to run great restaurants. And if you're going to be a great restaurant company, you need to have great food. And if you just do those two things, you're going to be successful. I think people understand the concept of, if you're going to be a great restaurant company, you need to have great food. The one that's a little bit more difficult for people to grasp is how important it is to run great restaurants. And that is less sexy. It's the blocking and tackling that you do on a daily basis, and is probably more important than having great food. I'll give you an example. During COVID, we were fortunate that in a 18-month period, our sales more than doubled, almost tripled. And if we hadn't have had the processes and systems in place to run great restaurants, what would have happened is those guests would have come, they would have seen that we weren't handling that increase in business, and they wouldn't have come back. The reason why we've been able to quintuple our average unit volumes is because when the business came, we were fanatical about running great restaurants. So when today we have $3.5 million average unit volumes, we have several restaurants that do more than 5 million, a couple that do more than 6 million. But back in the day when our average unit volumes were 700,000, we were just as fanatical about what we called PPP, peak period performance. Mm-hmm. And we thought we understood what a peak period was back at 700,000. It's something totally different today at 6 million. But because we put those foundational steps in place around peak period performance, and because we were just maniacal about peak period performance, when those sales came, we were ready. It wouldn't have mattered how good our food was. It wouldn't have mattered how good the cleanliness in our restaurant was. If we weren't fanatical about peak period performance and the processes that you need to have in place in order to do that, we wouldn't be where we are today, because those customers would have come once, seen chaos, and never come back.
Well, and I think that's like there's negative crisis and there's positive crisis. And we were talking about positive crisis on a $6 million operation. What you're saying is it's just as critical at 700 or at 6 million to have a leader that's calming the nerves, that's keeping the consistency, that doesn't let things get off track. And so in the positive crisis, it's almost like all those trainings led up to, okay, now it's go time, because if we screw up here, these customers don't come back.
One of the, I was very, very fortunate when I was brand new in the restaurant business in Domino's to meet Tom Monahan, who is the founder at Domino's. And he was a former Marine and I was a former Navy guy. We hit it off. And I remember one day I asked him, I said, Tom, what's the best way to raise sales in a restaurant? And he said, handle the rush. And that's what he always told anybody when any franchisee asked him, how do we increase sales in our restaurant? He would say, handle the rush. And I think that gets lost sometimes today. I have calls with my operators 7 days a week, 9 a.m. And what we talk about is how did we do at handling the rush the night before? Because if you handle the rush, if you deliver what we call an I love it here experience to the guests, then those guests are going to come back.
Handling the rush, yes, on the customer side for sure. But I would imagine it's also handling the rush of how do you give compassion and thanks and empathy to the staff afterwards too, right?
Yeah. So we talk a lot about delivering I love it here experiences to the guest, but one of the things that we know is that the guest's experience will never exceed the team member's experience. So I say that a lot. The guest experience will never exceed the team member's experience. So if you don't deliver an I love it here experience to your team members, then it makes it really hard for them to deliver an I love it here experience to the guests. So an example would be if you're understaffed and not delivering I love it here to the guest, those team members are extraordinarily stressed as well. And it's just not a great environment for them either. We have Super Bowl in San Francisco this week. And so our restaurants are very busy. And last night we had a couple team members who commute together, have a family situation that came up. And so they had to go home early. And so it was very busy and we were 2 people down for the last 3 or 4 hours of the night. And our restaurants stay open till 3 a.m. And if you've never worked in a restaurant after midnight, there's a little bit of extra kind of stress that goes along with it. But the first thing I thought about it this morning is what was that environment like for those team members? Yeah, you're 2 people down. And so your service suffers a little, but those team members, they get stressed a lot because, those 2 people can really make a difference.
I asked you when we were together, I said, what are your core values? And my assumption, just like every other company, would be here's our list. And some are like generic and there's really no value or core there. And you said, we have one. And it's just, I love it here. And then you went on to talk about a story about one of the employees that does not speak English and what that meant to you. Talk about that and talk about why you only have the one core value and what that means to the organization.
Yeah, so I think it's very important. I mentioned earlier that I think one of the core things that a leader has to do is take the difficult and make it simple. And it's hard enough to execute simple. As a leader, your job is to try to make things as easy to execute as possible. But right after I came to the Melt, I was trying to figure out how do we get our average unit volumes up? And as I mentioned, at that point, our average unit volumes were 700. I thought if we could get them to 1.5, that would be nirvana. I thought that would just be amazing. Didn't really know how to get there. But I'm pretty fanatical about guest feedback. I read all our guest feedback to this day within a couple of minutes of when it goes online. And we had a review from a guest at one of our highest volume restaurants that said, I love it here, and went on to explain why they loved it at that particular restaurant. And I started thinking, what would happen if every single guest could say, I love it here when they walked out that door? And so I asked my staff that question, and we spent, a bit of time talking about what would it take to deliver an I love it here experience to every guest. And then about a day later, I had a call with all of my team members, and I asked them, I said, we got this review at Stanford where the guest said, I love it here. What do you think it would be like in our restaurants if every guest could say, I love it here when they left? And within a couple of weeks, we had ripped up every mission and vision statement in our company and had gone with just one, which is our number one goal of delivering an I love it here experience to every guest. And we don't tell our teams how to deliver an I love it here experience. Twice a day, we have rallies before lunch and before dinner. And we ask our team members, what is I love it here? And they tell us what I love it here means to them. We say, what does it take for you to do, if you go to a restaurant, what does it take for you to have an I love it here experience? And then we say, okay, just do that. Just deliver what you think an I love it here experience is. So I've worked for some companies, some very large companies with unbelievably beautiful mission, vision, values, really beautiful, but they've never translated to the restaurant level. Virtually no place that I've ever been could people in the restaurants tell you what those mission, vision, and values are. One of the things I'm proud of at the Meld is you can visit any restaurant. You can ask any team member what our number one goal is. And I know when I was with you, we did this, and they'll tell you deliver an I love it here experience to every guest. Everyone is aligned around delivering that I love it here experience to every guest. One of the comparisons that I like to give, I said at Super Bowl time, this is apropos. Imagine a team where you don't have a huddle and you don't all align around your the play that you're going to run, and that you have 12 players all running a different play. It doesn't matter how good your players are, they're going to lose. At the Melt, not only do we get together and talk about what our play is going to be, which is I love it here, we only have one play. We run that same play every day. We get together twice a day to go over that play and talk about how we're going to execute it. And the power of having everyone aligned around that play is unbelievable. So to get to your question, when we were together, I went into the back of house and I was asking people about our number one goal. And I had a team member who spoke basically no English whatsoever. He's a Hispanic team member. I asked him what our number one goal is. And I've learned how to say our number one goal in Spanish, but it just gave me goosebumps to see this team member reciting our number one goal in English, and to think about how hard he worked to be able to say, deliver an I love it here experience to every guest in English. And he sat there in front of me, really working hard to get those words out. And I was just, I was so moved by the fact that despite the fact that English is not his native language, that he took the time to learn it so that he could tell me what the number one goal was.
When you're a high power leader, or in business or in life, it's often hard to take a moment for those pinch yourself moments. Was that one where at least you got to pause for a second and say, I've done something correct? I mean, far above a good burger. Like you've totally found a way to impact someone's life where it meant so much to them to try to work and fight and figure out how to say that in English.
Yeah, there's no doubt that that's true. Another thing that comes to mind is people don't understand how important recognition is. And a lot of times in our company, a lot of team members may not have had great leadership role models as they were growing up. But I had a fry cook at one of my restaurants in downtown San Francisco. His name was Zach. And I went in and I asked, Zach, what's your number one goal? He said, deliver an I love it here experience to every guest. And I said, that's great, Zach. So what does it mean on fries, on sides, to deliver an I love it here experience? And he say, I want my fries so hot that it'll burn your hands to pick them up. And so then as I visited him from then on, when I would ask him what his number one goal is, he would say, it's to burn your hands when you eat my fries and to deliver an I love it here experience to every guest. And so I have a pin. I grew up in New Orleans, and we had a saying in New Orleans, when you were really good, we said you were the baddest alligator in the swamp. And so I have a Melt baddest alligator in the swamp pin. And I just love Zach, and Zach was always trying to deliver I love it here fries. So I got a Melt baddest alligator in the swamp pin, and I presented it to Zach in front of the team at this restaurant in downtown San Francisco. And Zach started crying. And he said, this is the first time in my life I've ever gotten anything like this. I will never take this pin off. And he says, I promise you right now, when I'm buried, I'll be wearing this pin. And I think about that. I've thought about that every day for the past 10 years. Those are the kind of powerful things that you can do for people. And sometimes we forget how a little bit of recognition or a little bit of an I love it here experience for our team members, what a difference in their lives that can make. And I'll tell you, those are the things that make working in the restaurant business a whole lot of fun.
If you had hit 1.5 million when that's your original goal, I would have called that, like, that'd be a standard best in class regular burger brand as exists in the QSR fast casual category. And now what I'm hearing on your approach, the way you treat people, the culture, the recognition, making this more than just serving burgers, something with a bigger purpose that is individualized. I think there's some magic in just the word I being an I love it here, because that's able to be customized back to the team members and to the customer. And so, like, obviously the proof of the magic is that you've created store volumes that put you at the very, very, very top instantly in franchising as you go here. How long did it take you in your career to figure out that was that next stage of magic, that culture is currency?
Yeah. So I'd like to tell you that that I intuitively knew it right away, but I think that I learn something new every day. And I think that I've worked for big brands. As I mentioned, I was president of Popeyes, and one of my, I mentioned Tom Monahan as a mentor, but Cheryl Batchelder, who was the CEO of Popeyes when I was there, also a mentor. And she was a huge influence on me with her servant leadership culture that she installed at Popeyes. But it wasn't until I got to the Melt and we came up with I love it here that I realized the magic of having everybody aligned around a common goal. And now it makes total sense. But it's funny that it took me, 25 plus years in the restaurant business to figure out everybody being aligned around a common goal is magic. The thing is, everybody knows that, but I don't think that they understand what it takes to do that. Mm-hmm. Everybody has values. If you talk to anybody in any franchise organization, big or small, they'll be able to tell you what their values are. But the power of having every single person in the organization aligned around those values, there's nothing more important. Again, I just having, a lot of times it's interesting how our restaurant teams parallel football teams so closely. In our busiest restaurants, we have about 12 people that are on during the peaks, and having those 12 people all trying to run the same play, all having each other's back, all pointed in the same direction, just makes a tremendous impact, and it's meaningful. One of the things that I learned, I started to figure out in the military, but then really as I got into restaurants, I really became aware of, is that, I was a swimmer in college, and growing, my dad was a swimming coach, and swimming is kind of an individual sport, not really a team sport. But as I got into the military, I began to understand that achieving a major goal as a team is far more meaningful and impactful than achieving something as an individual. And throughout my career, there's been lots of examples of that. It started off, the first turning point for me was in the military. I was on a ship. We had a particular exam called an operational propulsion exam. And if you failed one, the chief engineer lost his job. And if you failed two, usually they relieved the commanding officer. And our ship failed one. And the chief engineer and a couple of people who reported to him were relieved. And they put my boss, who was a political science major, and me, who was an English major, the only two officers on the ship who weren't engineers. They made him chief engineer, made me boilers officer. And so then, lo and behold, we get another one of these inspections. And this one, you fail this one, the commanding officer is relieved. And I'd like to tell you that after a couple months, we were ready and we passed, but we failed it. But the leadership gave us an example, another chance. And they said, look, we got these two new guys, they're trying to turn it around. And so about 4 months later, we had the final inspection. And if we didn't pass this one, it meant everybody's career. And the last thing that happens on this inspection is a main space fire drill, where every single person on the ship, 350 people, everybody has a job to do. And every single person has to do their job or you fail the inspection. And not only did we pass, we got the highest score in the history of the Navy in our class of ship. And the amazing thing of getting 350 people aligned around a common goal and then achieving that goal, it was like nothing that I had ever achieved before. And then at Domino's, something similar happened. I went to a franchise where they had an inspection program at Domino's called Back to School. Like 57 of our 60 restaurants had failed that inspection the year before. I came and I said, my goal was to average 93. And we ended up averaging 99.3 and had every restaurant but one pass. One guy left his keys in his car. that was a automatic fail. But then seeing 60 restaurants come together and achieve this, also extraordinarily impactful, way more impactful than achieving something as an individual. So that is one of my core beliefs, is that achieving a goal as a team and accomplishing something as a team is far more meaningful than accomplishing something as an individual.
I have a comment, and I want your reaction to this. So, one, it's amazing because you keep going back in life and you see like things that you learned in the military and how to get everybody working and rowing in the same direction ends up impacting restaurants or franchising. And so I think about franchising, and there's a few components that I think are important to address. One is because obviously you're going to be launching this. You've created a blueprint of what a tremendous multi-unit operator should look like. And you've gone back to the people and made them feel special. Obviously, the restaurants are performing well. You know what to do in a rush. You know what to do after a rush. Like you've built the blueprint. And so part of what you have to protect now to get the next level of the team, these now business owners that are going to come in here and try building this, is to continue to swim in the same direction. So the twofold kind of statement is, does that worry you at all that now as you bring in a franchisee, you really need them to be an extension of the culture, not go do it separately? And they have to listen to the core values because it's been so magical to the unit performance here. And secondly, what is the magic to making a franchisee feel like a team? Because there are some franchisors that rule with an iron fist. How do you build team within a franchise organization where they are also investors as well as team members?
So let me unpack that for a second. So first of all, the only folks that we're going to be interested in at the Melt are folks that can get really excited about our number one goal of delivering an I Love It Here experience to every guest. If you can't be fanatical about delivering I Love It Here, the Melt is just not going to be a good fit. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how many restaurants you want to build. The Melt, yes, we have the best burger that you can get in the country, but the Melt is about more than great food. It's about delivering I Love It Here. As a franchisor, your job is not to deliver I Love It Here to the guest. Your job is to deliver I Love It Here to the franchisee. Mm-hmm. And I Love It Here to the franchisee means, profitable restaurants. It means I Love It Here, training and support for the restaurants. But that was one of the things that, I've learned in the other franchise brands that I've worked for, is that you have to realize that as a franchisor, your goal is to serve the franchisee. And that was the turning point at Popeyes when I was there, is that when we decided that the franchisee was our customer and that we were going to focus ourselves on serving the franchisee, that's what turned us around, and that's what ignited growth there. We're going to have that same culture at Melt. It's going to be about us delivering that I Love It Here experience to the franchisee with I Love It Here levels of support and I Love It Here sales and profits.
Well, I think the magic of all of this. Oh, there's two comments. One is the magic of I Love It Here is, I do think, because I saw it in real time, and it's hard. Like, you can hear it and you can see it, and when you can see it, you see it in action. And I can see why there's a difference between 700,000 and then units that can perform well north of 3 million. One example that is still, I've been thinking a lot about this. It's like, all right, the restaurant industry has been taught that the way that you create superior customer experience is you give the customer a pickle. Well, you didn't just give a pickle, then you gave a bite of a cookie. And so I see like these little tweaks. I watched you study the operations of how the product gets created in the back of the house and how you teach someone and give them the tools where they feel proud about building the perfect burger. And so I see all these small details that what's amazing to me is what you said, and this is not meant as a put down statement. This is not rocket science, but it might be, because so many businesses fail to just do this. And it's like, look what happens when you just do this. Like, I Love It Here should be the single core value of every business in America. And so it's interesting to watch it in reality and with a scorecard that's proven on the financials, that if a franchisee can get there, if a franchisee can understand the magic of understanding how to battle through a crisis mode, good and bad, like the magic of what you're saying does create superior business, because the category should be 1.5 million unit volumes and you're more than double that.
Yeah. So, it doesn't happen overnight either. But one of the things I'm fanatical about delivering. I love it here. We've talked about it in every aspect of the business, but um, I am fanatical about guest feedback. And because if you ask guests what you need to do, they'll tell you. When I first got to the Melt, I asked, we had a database of several thousand people, and I sent out a letter to each one. And I said, I'm Ralph, I'm the new guy. I'm going to ask you two questions. What do you hope I change? And what do you hope I don't change? And we got 1,100 responses back. Then I went out to my restaurants and I talked to my general managers, assistant managers, shift supervisors. And I said, I'm Ralph. I'm the new guy. What do you hope I change? What do you hope I don't change? And cataloged their answers. Then I took those 1,100 responses from our guests. I took those several hundred responses from our team members, and then I did what they said to do. And then, hey, guess what? We were successful, and our average unit volumes quintupled. I'm wrong about 50% of the time. We made some decisions during COVID. I was positive, based on my experience, based on my superior intellect, that the longest COVID could last would be 2 or 3 weeks. And so we told our team members, hey, we'll pay you whether you come to work or not. Because I was a little bit in a state of panic that I didn't want to let all these people go. And then when shelter in place was over in 2 or 3 weeks, I wouldn't have any people left. Mm-hmm. What ended up happening, of course, is shelter in place lasted a day or two longer than 2 or 3 weeks. It lasted over a year. Mm-hmm. But, one of the things that I listened to is my team members were really worried about their next paycheck and how are they going to make ends meet. And so I listened to them and I took action based on what they were telling me. Another example of where I listened to team members and made a decision I wouldn't have made on my own is third-party delivery. So in about 2017, my IT folks came to me and said, we think we should do third-party delivery. And I said, absolutely not. We're gonna deliver substandard food, not make any money at it. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. We're not going to do it. They said, well, I think we ought to at least test it. I said, okay, fine. If you guys really believe in this, we'll do it. And so we tested it in one restaurant, and we got 3 or 4% in sales. And I thought, I was doing $700,000 at the time. And I thought, well, you know what? I could use that 3 or 4% in sales. So we expanded the test and eventually took delivery to all of our restaurants. And then, so going into COVID, third-party delivery had grown to 18 or 20%. And then everybody knows during COVID, it went all the way up to 80 or 90%. But if I hadn't listened to my team members, and despite my better, despite my better instincts, kind of took their advice and said, hey, this is something that we should give a try, we wouldn't be where we are today. Today we do, during COVID, it was 80% delivery. Today we still do about 40% delivery. And that wouldn't have happened at all if it hadn't been for the team pushing me in that direction. Almost all of our new products come from our team members. I had a team member, Candace, who's been with the Melt longer than I have. She's been with us 12 or 13 years. And she said, Ralph, we need to have strawberry lemonade. And I said, Candace, you're very hard to say no to. If you want to put strawberries in your lemonade, put strawberries in your lemonade. And then poof, we sell more strawberry lemonade than we sell regular lemonade. And then she said, we need to have strawberry milkshakes. And I said, Candace, look, you're just very hard to say no to. But if you want to make strawberry milkshakes, you already have the strawberries. Go ahead and make strawberry milkshakes. And now strawberry milkshakes are our second highest selling. Then she came to me. She was really crazy. She said, Ralph, we need to deliver milkshakes. I said, Candy, that's ridiculous. Nobody's going to get a milkshake delivered. By the time it gets there, it's going to be melted. Nobody's going to want a delivered milkshake. And we deliver an unbelievable number of milkshakes, and they don't thaw in the 30 minutes that it takes to get to the house. And so all these are things that I would have never done on my own. But in the franchising business, the exact same thing applies. There are no good ideas that come from corporate. All good ideas come from the franchisee. Look back to KFC. The Colonel did not come up with the bucket. It was Pete Harmon who came up with the bucket and pretty much everything else that exists at KFC. The franchisees have their life savings into the investments. And if you will listen to them, they will tell you what you need to do to be successful. It's one of the reasons I'm very excited about bringing franchisees into the brand is I think that we're pretty darn successful today, but I think franchisees are only going to make us better. They'll have ideas of things that I've never even thought of. And as long as we're smart enough to not have to have pride of ownership and listen to what they have to say, our brand's going to be better for it.
When we were sitting together, I remember I asked you, I said, okay, now I'm going to ask you your 2 questions back to you. And your answer was, so what would you change? You said, I change things so fast. If I need to change something, I change it. And I thought about that answer. I was like, what I should have asked is go back to the younger version of yourself in this industry as a leader. What would you have changed about you then? That's what I really should have asked.
Yeah. So I think about that all the time. I think I would have been way more focused on restaurant excellence and having high, uncompromising standards around restaurant excellence. I think sometimes when you're working for really big brands that you think that it's just really difficult to turn that ship. Mm-hmm. But if I had to do all over again, I would have been more maniacal about having high, uncompromising standards around peak period performance and running great restaurants. I just can't say it often enough. If you're going to be a great restaurant company, you need to run great restaurants. And I will tell you right now, I would bet 75% of the people in the restaurant business don't even know what I'm talking about when I say that. And but you've got to be fanatical about peak period performance. You've got to be fanatical about running great restaurants. It's not enough to have great food. It's not enough to have great hospitality. You need to run great restaurants.
I'm gonna close with this. What's the dream now? And the dream can be short term or long term, because now you're gonna launch into franchising. Where does your dream? How does your dream adjust now as you go forward?
Yeah, look, I think I want to deliver. I love it here to every state in the country. I think the best way to do that is with franchisees who know those different DMAs, know those different trade areas. I think we have something that's special with not only the best burger and the best grilled cheese sandwich that you can get in any restaurant in the country, but also I love it here experiences that you can't get anywhere else. And as long as we have the right partners, I think that we can take that nationwide. And that's, so that's my dream.
Love it. Ralph, I've said this to you before. What I saw in action in person definitely changed my perception. My perception was not bad because I saw what the volumes were, but I understood how you got there. And I don't know that I've seen, there's been only a handful of the thousands of franchise brands that I've seen or worked with where I've seen a foundation this strong. And so now the sky ends up being the limit. And as long as you stay protective of the core value, it's going to be very exciting to see Melt actually reach that dream of being in all 50 states. And I'm grateful that you gave me time. I'm grateful that I've got to spend time with you. And thank you so much for sharing some of your story with us.
Thank you, Nick. I really appreciate you taking the time as well.
Love it. For Ralph, I'm Nick. This was another episode of Meet the Franchise.